In 1914, a single bullet fired from a handgun initiated a sequence of events that would soon draw 4 continents into the first truly industrialized conflict in human history. The sharp percussion of that pistol shot was quickly answered by the synchronized roar of thousands of heavy artillery pieces and the rhythmic tramping of millions of boots marching toward the front lines. This map of pre-war Europe shows a continent rigged with diplomatic tripwires. It was split into 2 rigid camps, the Triple Entente, consisting of Britain, France, and Russia, and the Central Powers, anchored by Germany and Austria-Hungary. On June 28, 1914, those tripwires were triggered. A Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip stepped toward a royal carriage in Sarajevo and assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. This localized political murder acted as the specific spark. The assassination forced the leaders of the great powers to choose between abandoning their allies or plunging the entire continent into a firestorm. The reaction was instantaneous. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, triggering Russia's immediate mobilization. Germany preemptively struck France, hoping to knock them out before the Russians arrived. This forced Britain's entry. Soon, the fighting bled across the oceans, pulling 37 nations into the struggle. The alliance network, originally built as a deterrent to keep the peace, functioned as the exact mechanism that guaranteed a global catastrophe. The war of movement soon died. Millions of men became bogged down in a sprawling, muddy network of trenches that stretched across the Western Front. Military strategy failed to keep pace with technology. Commanders ordered mass infantry charges into the teeth of barbed wire and rapid-fire machine guns, making traditional tactics suicidal. To break the deadlock, armies introduced chemical weapons like chlorine and mustard gas, designed to choke men in their dugouts and flush them into the open. By 1916, a new mechanical solution appeared. Heavily armored, treaded tanks were deployed as a desperate means to crush through the wire and survive the crossing of no man's land. The conflict expanded beneath the waves as well. German U-boats patrolled the Atlantic, using torpedoes to hunt Allied supply ships and starve the British Isles. In the sky, primitive biplanes were weaponized for the first time. Pilots flew over enemy lines on high-stakes missions, utilizing large aerial cameras to scout troop movements and artillery positions. Sustaining this scale of war required the total mobilization of society. With millions of men at the front, women stepped into the munitions factories, running the lathes that produced a constant stream of artillery shells. The Industrial Revolution had been thoroughly weaponized. Battlefields functioned as mechanized meat grinders, where human life was consumed as a raw material for the machines of war. By 1917, Europe was exhausted and bled white, but German submarine attacks on civilian ships, along with secret attempts to draw Mexico into the war, finally forced the United States to abandon its neutrality. A massive influx of fresh American troops and immense economic resources began pouring across the Atlantic. This overwhelming reinforcement arrived just as the German military was collapsing from starvation and internal revolt. The end came in the autumn of 1918. An armistice was signed, taking effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The collapse was driven by a calculation of resources. By late 1918, the immense tonnage of American industrial output and its financial reserves effectively suffocated the German war effort, forcing a surrender through sheer economic exhaustion. The final tally reveals the true weight of the conflict. Over 16 million people were dead and 22 million were wounded, leaving the continent physically and demographically scarred. The political map of the Old World was erased. The Russian, German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman empires dissolved entirely, fracturing into a collection of smaller, unstable states. In 1919, the Allied powers signed the Treaty of Versailles. This document was intended to finalize the peace and ensure that such a catastrophe could never happen again. The treaty failed to secure lasting peace. Instead, its harsh terms planted the seeds for an even darker sequel 20 years later, ensuring that when diplomacy failed again, the next chain reaction would